morning.
Good morning!
Alright. I lived in Seattle for the first 14 years of my life. I went to the Seattle Academy of Arts and Sciences. It was there that I learned how important first impressions are. As with any sixth grader in a new school and an equally new environment, I was awkward and uneasy. The kids I spent the first 6 years of my life with were now outside of my social radar, and I was hoping that I could relate to the new kids. I failed. I made a bad first impression. A terrible first impression, in fact. I wasn't a bad kid, I wasn't completely socially inept, yet that first impression of me, the very first time I ever interacted with those kids, stuck for 3 long years, and nobody, despite radical personal changes, was willing to revise their views of me.
We, the human race, have this crazy tendency to strive for comfort. We go out of our way, we rearrange our lives so that when we get up in the morning, we know that there's a place for us. A place where we will be accepted for who we are and what we believe in. The problem, of course, is that initially we have no idea that this place exists. That's a scary thing, and I was scared. In 7th grade, I didn't really fit in anywhere. I wasn't in a new school or a new country or anything. I just wasn't comfortable going from day to day, not knowing where I belonged or which lunch table to sit at. There were all these new kids to meet and to talk to and to be intimidated by, and I knew that I had to pick which ones I was going to be friends with. 7th graders, however, are cruel and unforgiving. They took one look at me, my giant bushy hair, my imperfect skin, my inability to finish a sentence, and they judged me. I was a loser geek. And I should go hang out with other loser geeks. I, at the time, was a subservient creature, and I did what I was told.
Starting last week and continuing for the next couple of weeks, our Torah readings have and will deal with an intriguing character, Joseph. Now, Joseph wasn't the best of guys. He initially had no humility to speak of. He was repeatedly cruel and arrogant towards his brothers. Surprisingly, as a result of his actions, he gets himself thrown into a pit, and not too long afterwards, slavery. By not recognizing his insensitivity towards his brothers, Joseph eliminates the possibility of teshuvah, repentance, and gets stuck in a bad situation that keeps spiraling towards despair. Luckily, after all Joseph went through, in this week's Torah portion, Miketz, Joseph emerges a new person. It took an extreme change of environment and a whole lot of time and introspection on his part for him to become aware of his faults and effectively change them.
Joseph, after he'd been sold into slavery in Egypt, after he'd been thrown into prison, was one day called up to meet with the anxious Pharaoh. Pharaoh had been experiencing some troubling dreams, some absurd mishmash about scraggly wheat and cannibalistic cows that none of his wise men could interpret. Joseph stepped up to the plate. He was no longer the arrogant boy of Vayeshev. He was humble and clear-headed and so excellent a dream interpreter that the Pharaoh helped him rise up from mere slave to second in command of Egypt. He made a very good first impression. 14 years later, his brothers show up. They meet up with a newly powerful and simultaneously humble Joseph and are so incapable of understanding change that they don't realize that they're talking to their own brother. It just so happens that the only time that we're willing to open up our minds to absorb new information about a person is when we first meet them. After we meet them, however, we simply shove them into a category in our head and manipulate the very idea of them until they fit into some predefined schema. Until finally, we think of them as simply a loser or a jock or an arrogant dream-interpreting brother. I had been classified. I had been seen throughout school with my goofy, uncontrollable hair, fixing teachers' computers, and confessing my love for both my dungeons and my dragons. There was no easier task than to classify me as what I appeared to be, the antisocial loser geek. The most uncomfortable period of my life were the first few years of high school. I knew what I was supposed to be, what everyone told me I was supposed to be. But I wanted to be more than that. I wanted to go to new parties, make new friends, and have adventures that weren't virtual. So one day, I went out and I cut off my hair.
Because my peers in Seattle weren't able to reassess their judgments of me, I wasn't allowed to change myself. Everyone fits into the role assigned to them, and that becomes their identity, for better and, unfortunately, for worse. Stuck between what people expected of me and what I wanted people to see me as, the former one out, my individuality was compromised. I was stuck. I was so lucky to be able to move away from Seattle. I was lucky enough to get a well-needed reality check and changing perspective. I moved to Israel and I met kids who were so much more kind and more understanding than their Seattle counterparts. And I realized that in this environment, I could finally be the person who I wanted to be. No expectations of how I should act, no preconceived notions of my character. I could start anew. Not only could I be my own person, but my friends allowed me to change, accepting the fact that I had the potential to grow and mature, leaving the old me far behind. It is in this kind of environment that I see potential for everyone to learn, grow, and mature, without the possibility of being wrongly judged. Pirkei Avot 1:6 has a message very similar to ours. Dan kol ha'adam l'chafsakut, meaning literally, judge everyone favorably. I really like the idea of judging everyone favorably, in the best way possible. It's as if to say, recognizing someone's traits isn't enough. The way to a good relationship is to recognize the good traits in people and try to see everything in a good light. This means that when you pass by someone in the hall, take all of the past experiences and information you know about the person and try to look at it from a different viewpoint and try to look at it in a positive way. Pharaoh, when he first meets Joseph, utilizes this sentiment and chooses to judge Joseph on his actions right then and there, rather than judging him by the fact that he did time in the slammer and was a slave. Joseph, by that time, had endured so much, had lived in bondage, and because of this, had become a different person. This emphasizes our point. Given the opportunity, anybody can change. I was able to change because the people around me simply let me. This doesn't mean that a person's individuality is entirely dependent on his or her social situation, but that does mean that our environment plays a huge role in who we are and who we are allowed to be.
Rabbi Neil Lovinger of Temple, Israel, Massachusetts said that we can look at each other and evade the truth as long as we like, but eventually reality catches up to us. After I cut my hair, my closer friends resisted. They told me they didn't like it, that it made me look weird. They refused to accept the fact that their goofy friend might have actually done something right. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance, the tension that results from having two conflicting thoughts at the same time, and they didn't like it at all. My extended network of friends, however, the ones I didn't see every day, did something amazing. They treated me like a new person, like a human being. I was no longer just that person that they could ask for help when their iPod crashed. Now I was a person they could have a conversation with, a person they could invite to parties and ask for opinions. It didn't matter that I had been this person internally for the past 3 years. It only mattered that they could actually visualize it, that they could process it. So I have one question. It's a question I've asked myself dozens of times, but now I'm asking all of you. Did I have to do it? Should I have had to change myself to cut off my hair in order to be rejudged and recalculated in all of your eyes? Should Ben have had to move halfway across the world in order to change people's impression of him?
The fact is that people change. People around you, your friends sitting next to you, they're entirely different people than the people you met on the first day of school. Every person has the potential to be a friend. All that we ask is that you make the effort to recognize that people are continuously changing. To recognize that given the chance, anybody can change. That given the opportunity, your opinion of someone change. And given your effort, you can strengthen your relationship with everyone.
And it shouldn't have to take a new wardrobe or a new social circle or a new haircut for you to realize that.
As you go through high school and college, you will undergo dramatic changes in your taste, your character, and your identity. All that we ask is that you take the time to recognize these changes in yourself and everyone around you.